There was an arrest, multiple arrests made in what have been a horrific string of crimes where you have these what appeared to be young black men in the videos who were attacking mostly elderly Asian American individuals, mostly in South Seattle, and they would steal valuables from them, etc. And thankfully, the Seattle Police Department had committed what little resources they have to trying to solve this. It had become kind of a political to-do with the mayor speaking out about it. And now there have been at least 5 arrests associated specifically with that string of attacks. There were some other people arrested as part of the larger investigation that went on. But let me talk about these suspects first. Let's talk about the adults first. And I use that term pretty loosely because they are young men, but under the eyes of the law, they are adults. And then I'm going to talk about the juvenile that's involved in this. 28-year-old DeMarcus Pate, 26-year-old Deleuno Habtai, 30-year-old Havez Paul Tubbs, and 32-year-old Tyrone Marr. Now, you might be wondering, hey, Brandi, how come you have pictures of them? Because under the law in Washington State, the King County Jail, if someone's booked, can't release their photographs. Well, we have pictures of them because the Department of Corrections had pictures of them because, shock of the century, amongst them, there's a long list of criminal acts that they've already committed. Our friend Jonathan Cho got their images from the Department of Corrections. And I know that won't come as a surprise to anyone that, oh my gosh, people who were allegedly committing a string of violent attacks on elderly Asian Americans had a criminal history. Yeah. But what's interesting when it comes to what they were charged with in those individuals, and they were given high bail, which knock me over with a feather. Can't believe it that they were actually given high bail. DeMarcus Pate, $1.5 million bail, charged with unlawful possession of a firearm. Deleuno Habti, $2 million bail, charged with 3 counts unlawful possession of a firearm. Havez Tubbs, $1.5 million bail, charged with unlawful possession of a firearm. Tyrone Marr, $1.25 million bail, charged with 2 counts unlawful possession of a firearm. But I have to say that one of the individuals who has the most charges being levied against them in connection with these attacks is a 16-year-old. And honestly, I think that's probably because the adults are like, hey, you do this stuff, you do the worst of the worst aspects of this, because they're just going to give you a slap on the wrist and let you go. The 16-year-old charged with 3 counts of robbery, 3 counts of burglary, a single charge of theft. Now, he's being held, again, knock me over with a feather, in juvenile detention, being detained right now with no bail. Now, Como News was in the courtroom for this 16-year-old's court appearance, and this 16-year-old seemed utterly shocked that he was not going to be allowed to go home to mommy and daddy.
Can't get house arrest? You let people out who shoot at people get house arrest.
Well, I'm not letting you out.
Why not?
Why not? Maybe you should ask Mr. Minor why not.
I mean, I don't even know what else could more perfectly illustrate the point I've been making about our criminal justice system and why people like this 16-year-old feel as if they can commit acts of violence and get away with it. He is utterly baffled as to why he would not get house arrest, telling the judge, well, you let people who shoot at each other get house arrest. And he says, well, I'm not letting you out, which love a judge saying that to the 16-year-old, sending a message that, hey, no, what you did is very serious. The kid responds, well, why not? And the judge says, ask your attorney. This is a 16-year-old charged with 3 counts of robbery, 3 counts of burglary, and a single theft charge tied to what has been one of the most violent and egregious strings of crime that I have seen in my time in Seattle. And he is utterly dumbfounded as to why he does not get to go home on house arrest. So when we say repeatedly, again, this is common sense stuff. This is common sense stuff. If you know that there are not going to be consequences for your actions, because you've seen, your friends go and do serious things and there's not consequences for their actions, if you know or you believe that there are not going to be consequences for your criminal conduct, the only thing that would stop you, I guess, is a moral center, a moral compass. But absent a moral center and a moral compass, then yeah, you're going to commit crimes. You're going to commit crimes for money, for drugs, for gang reasons. Because one of the things that would disincentivize you from committing crimes would be the prospect of serious repercussions. So clearly, and I think this is what happened. I think these adult suspects convince this 16-year-old kid, based on their experience on the streets, based on what they've seen happen in other cases, they convinced him, they said, hey, you do the majority of this. You do the worst parts of this, these attacks. And they're just going to give you a slap on the wrist. You're going to come home. You're going to get a little ankle monitor. You're going to be able to game at home and do everything. There's not going to be consequences for you. And I pray to God that the criminal justice system throws the book at that young man. Because until that happens, there are going to be more 16-year-olds like him who look at what happened in other cases and say, okay, I can get away with this because my friends did too. So you don't have to believe me when I tell you their lack of consequences is to blame for this crime crisis that we're in, particularly the crime crisis when it comes to young men. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to take my word for it. The criminals know. And the criminals are telling us that they believe that there aren't going to be consequences for their actions. Straight from the horse's mouth.